Hello and welcome to the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachie Avil. Joining with me today on this lovely Thursday is Jacob Stevens. Jacob, hello to you. We've seen news come through the 7th of January today as we're recording. We all knew this was, well, the 5th day of destiny for Western United. They seem to have passed another one. They are still ticking and we go along to the next.
Yep, it rolls on, doesn't it? The Western United story just keeps on going. It doesn't matter how much you scream at it to stop. It's just going to extend itself at least for the rest of this season and then into next off season, and then who knows if they come back or not. We never know. But I mean, there's more promising signs now than there has been in probably the last 8 or 9 months with this football club. So I suppose that's a positive to take, right? Is that they're not completely dead and buried just yet. By the sounds of things, it seems like there's some kind of assurance they have enough money to pay off their debts. Like, it's obviously, let's not rush to conclusions and say they're definitely back and, who's going to be in their squad next year and all that. As I've seen conversations about that already, which is wild to me. There's absolutely no certainty they're going to be back next season, but it's definitely a much more positive outlook now than it was in the last few months.
Yes, so you're right to stress that this is step one of the path back. A lot of the other, news points of the last 3-4 months, ever since September when they went into hibernation, it has been, delaying a demise, right? A lack of the last step of Western United. This is the first one to come back, and it is just the first of what will be many. So what we learned today, will Western United be back in the A-League? We don't know. Will John Aloisi be there? We probably think not. He's off to China. Will any of their players come back? We don't know. We don't know a lot still, but what we do know is that today, January 7th, was the day that the ATO gave Western United a deadline to prove to them that they could cover their $15.5 million debt that they owe the ATO in order to essentially revoke the wind-up order. And once we get past that barrier, once there is no longer a wind-up order on Western United, then they can focus on other financial issues in terms of getting their FIFA ban, registration ban overturned, paying all their past staff and players up to a certain point that they owed, and then they can begin hopefully negotiating with the APL to come back into the league and building a playing squad, hiring a new head coach, and build towards re-entry into the league. So basically, confirmation has come today that Western United have secured that $15.5 million and will be able to cover that ATO debt. So this money is supposedly, this is all reporting from the Herald Sun, who broke the news earlier today, that major lender Johnson Controls, which is the company that we spoke about back in December when the hearing with the ATO was, is that creditor that is going to, lender, I should say, that is going to give Western United the money to pay this debt. So for what motive, Jacob, for what in return, who knows? There is so much behind the scenes that we were going on, but that is essentially the news. That $15.5 million that was proposed, and that wasn't solid because there were a lot of proposals, rescue packages before that. This one appears to be solid.
Yeah, like I said, just there's more to this than there has been with any speculation with this club recently. So I think that's the main thing to take from it. And it's just, I don't know. I'm kind of in two minds about this, right? Because you don't want to see a football club go up in flames and, another one for the A-League would be a horrible thing. But it's too far away to say that they're definitely fine, they're definitely safe, they're going to be fine, they're going to be back. It keeps them in limbo, I suppose, for a little while longer, and you can't help but feel for anyone involved with the club, right? Fans as well, particularly, right? This will be giving them some kind of hope to be like, well, maybe we're on our way back, and there's absolutely no guarantee of it. It's just, it's really an interesting time now, and this was the date that was marked in everybody's calendars, I suppose, from an A-League perspective of this could be a really big moment for this club and for the league, and so far it's okay for them. And that's the thing I keep stressing is it's just fine. It's just okay. It's not brilliant and it's not spectacular. But you take that given how negative things have been for them recently. So yeah, look, I don't know what much more to say there. It's just okay. It's just fine. They've got, like you said, a lot of work still to do to keep going, and they're kind of they can now get onto like a payment plan, right? Like a pay as you go type scheme, I suppose, and slowly work away at this. But there is, and I saw an interesting comment which I found quite amusing, but also it raised an interesting point, which is that A-League clubs are renowned for being about as far from profitable as you can expect. And that's kind of the risk that you take investing in a football club in this country. But it begs the question of how did a football club that isn't making money rack up a $15 million tax debt? That's an interesting, that's an interesting one. But no, I mean, it's at least they're kind of making moves now to try and sort this out. Watch something else blow up in the next 24 hours, though, I can guarantee it.
Yeah, look, we won't profess to be financial experts in tax law or anything, but the debt is definitely there. The ATO have made that very clear, which is what we can work with. The other element of this news, and this was posited in December as well, it was mentioned in the court hearing that around another $5 million might come through from a company that is involved with Paul Lederer, who was the former, now is current again, chairman of the Western Sydney Wanderers. He's back in charge there as chairman of the board. So that money will, you'd assume, go towards settling those other financial issues. Like we said, we know there's the court case with Prijovic in terms of some pay that he was due when he was let go by the club, and that's the reason. That's what triggered their registration ban. It's why Jaden Kaczarski couldn't play for the club in the Cup during the preseason, and why he went over to Perth so much earlier. To be fair, it worked out for him because he was in that kind of early stage and was able to find a club. We can't forget that so many players, you look at the success story is someone like an Ollie Laval who went to South Melbourne, didn't get a pro contract in the A-League, went to South Melbourne, played well in the Australian Championship, and now the rumour is he's on his way to the Central Coast in January. So he's got back into the A-League, but there are players that haven't done that. So this has been a really devastating time for a lot of people. You mentioned the supporters as well. They're constantly waiting to see if their club will be back or not. Hopefully this extra $5 million from Lederer or whatever company it is, right? He's obviously the football connection, will go towards bringing them back. And then assuming that, the next month or so, if all these things go to plan, even if we're saying the start of February, and I think that's pretty optimistic for all these issues to be sorted out. If you go to the APL and you say this is happening and they say, yes, okay, you can come back next season, that's still a short window. You've only got till, really late September by the time all the squads start working out to build another squad from scratch. They're essentially, again, 6 or 7 years later, an expansion team again.
Yeah. Yeah, and they, the only real benefit they have is not having to do things like finding a place to play, like colors and identity and that kind of stuff, right? That's the stuff that's sorted. But yeah, building a squad from scratch, like you said, their players are all gone. They've all gone and taken other opportunities, some to different degrees of success. I wouldn't be surprised if in some circumstances other A-League clubs would be willing to offer mutual termination to former Western United players in the event that the club came back. Not really. I'm not talking like, he's a starter, he's, like a really key part of the team. But
I'm thinking like Ben Garuccio at Sydney, like there's no way they do it for him.
Or someone like but someone like a Jake Nijovski at Adelaide United. He's seen all of 3 minutes so far this season. And it's like, well, we can kind of concede that we're happy to let you go. And, there's other players in that position that we can look to anyway. So it's fine. There'll at least be, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of those kind of returning players, but it's going to be difficult for them for sure. I mean, the good thing, I suppose, is that we have seen such good quality at an NPL and championship level recently. Like, the footballers that have been coming through there have been tremendous. But it's always a risk, obviously, taking a punt on these relatively unestablished, inexperienced players. And you're kind of then left with a very bare bones squad. You're not going to want to go too big too early in this. If anything, they will probably be extremely conservative. So it's not like they're going to be out there signing big name players and kind of like they did at the start of their journey. So yeah, it's going to be
just on the NPL player point as well. Like someone left a comment on one of our recent podcasts about this, and I completely agree. The dynamic between the NPL and the A-League at the moment, we talk a lot about the quality gap shortening, but as the financial gap shortens as well between what the NPL clubs and the A-League clubs are capable of, because the NPL is part-time, at least for a lot of these clubs. We know Heidelberg have been training 4 or 5 times a week at points, whatever, but most of these clubs are part-time. So the opportunity in terms of total financial ability for someone to play part-time at a football club and also work a full-time job is often significantly larger than what they have stepping into the base level of an A-League contract. So the A-League has to actually establish that strength to where they can actually attract the top talent for the NPL players. Like, obviously, if they have ambitions of being professionals, then that's a different story. But there is some talent that are very comfortable with their lives in the NPL.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, all these clubs that haven't had these problems in recent years have been able to kind of establish things like youth pathways, right, is a big one. So I think that's going to be a key that Western United will look at if they come back is, right, we've got to establish our own ability to develop players. And they did that when they were around, right? They were one of the better clubs at doing that. But they've got to start from scratch. And I think that's going to be a big point of importance because, like you said, those upper echelon of players at NPL level, it's not going to necessarily be the most attractive to make the jump to the A-League, not in every circumstance at least, and probably especially not with Western United and what will likely be still some uncertain circumstances around them. So, I think that's going to be a key area for them to look at, is to continue to do that and go, well, maybe we're not going to be competitive for quite a while because we know we're going to have a hamstrung budget because we just want to stay around, but we can just keep focusing on going back to our roots of what we did really well, of developing these young players and having that talent coming through our own system so we're not having to attract it from elsewhere. And that's, you know, something that a lot of A-League clubs are now doing a lot better in recent years, especially after the success that the Mariners had, kind of doing the same thing. So yeah, that's going to be a key one for them. And it's actually an interesting point you bring up about this kind of the gap in pay being, you know, kind of not equalizing, but getting much closer, right, between the NPL level and the A-League level. Because it's something we've actually seen in South Australia for quite a long time, between the upper levels of like the amateur league and the lower levels of state league football, where there are amateur league players that are doing quite well for themselves, and it is far more beneficial for them to just stick around at that level making some good money than it is for them to go up into the state league stuff. So it's, you know, it kind of exists at all levels, I suppose, where if you're good enough, you know, those smaller, lower clubs are going to want to keep you around and are going to offer a little bit more. Whereas when there's, you know, competition and there's other players that, you know, might be, you know, happy to take a little bit less, the bigger clubs will do that. So it's definitely an interesting kind of, little comparison that I found in all of this, because it's something that we definitely see in football a lot, but it's just now starting to come in, where football, it's in kind of, as much as there's always a negative kind of spin on things that are happening in football, it does feel like it's in a pretty decent like period in terms of the football itself, the player development, the strength of clubs, particularly at that NPL level. It just feels a little bit better now than it has done in a long time. And I think that's what we're seeing now, where things are starting to close in. These clubs that have a little bit more spending power and that ability to go out and get sponsors for themselves much more easily and things like that. And now with the introduction of the championship, of course, that's going to make things hopefully even better for them. So it's going to keep closing in, and that is another challenge for Western United to try and overcome if they do indeed come back to the A-League. Building a squad, how do you attract those players? Because, you know, you would be foolish not to look at the NPL as being your local leagues. There's players that'd be available, but you've got to make an attractive offer for them, and sometimes you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. One final point on Western United, and I'm not sure the operations of how a hibernation actually works. My understanding is it's a pretty bespoke agreement that they've negotiated between Western United and the APL. So I don't know what the terms are, but if their license conditions can be changed at all, I think it's really important that the APL learn their lessons from Western United first came into the league and put some requirements around the stadium. I want to see. The financial turnaround is hard, but I don't think, given what's happened in the past 6 or 7 years of being them club, is it unreasonable to suggest that we want to see shovels in the ground before they're admitted back into the A-League? who says the hibernation shouldn't go for an extra year to give them time to actually fulfill some of the promises that they made about a decade ago now, in terms of actually building the stadium and how they get there, how the functionality of they get there. I'm not really sure, but that's the club's prerogative. It's the club's, that's their problem to deal with. It's ride or die for that club. We've seen, the days of the league helping out clubs financially are over. Then it's not going to happen again with Perth Glory or the Newcastle Jets or Wellington Phoenix. There's been a clear line in the sand drawn through this period. The league is not going to step in anymore because they can't afford to. That's part of the reason why the whole league is in the situation it is now. So I want to see, and we still haven't seen Steve Rosic make any public appearances. We've made a request for an interview. Hopefully sometime in February that will happen. We'll see. We're not quite really sure what's going to happen there, but I think it'll be a good opportunity to put his foot down and say, this league is going to happen with or without you. It's up to Western United to figure out their own issues and build a stadium. And at least as soon as you can prove to us that that is happening, not going to happen, it is happening right now, then you can come back.
Yeah. If it's happening, you can come. I think that sums it up perfectly, Lachie, to be honest. It's one of those things where, I genuinely don't know what more to add, to be honest. I'm actually, I think that sums it up perfectly. I can try. Give me a moment to think of something.
Let's leave it there.
I genuinely can't think of anything more to add. That's pretty well summed up.
I think so. That's the situation with Western United at the moment. Hopefully, we were going to record something earlier in the day, but we hadn't seen a club statement. We still haven't or anything. So hopefully we'll see something in the next couple of days and we'll let you know when they do pop up. Let's jump into the football, shall we? We had our final little midweek games for this summer kind of Christmas, New Year's period. We're back to the weekend schedule. Brisbane Roar travelled to Melbourne City, two teams that have actually had a really full run of schedules, Jake, and I think you could see that playing out in this game. I think it's rare that you see a Melbourne City team play such a transitional game, such an open.
It was not what they wanted, was it? It was,
It's not what they wanted, but it's what they got, and you got to make the best of it. And City did, to be fair to them. And Michael Valkonis was really disappointed in the way they conceded their set piece on Tuesday night. Brendan Lawton, because I was watching it a bit close just to try and see what happened, and Nathaniel Atkinson kind of blocks Lawton, but I think it's completely accidental. You see Caputo's first run, he kind of goes in and then realizes the ball is a bit deeper than he wants and steps back out.
Makes that adjustment,
Lawton just kind of runs into Atkinson. Caputo does well to adjust to the flight of the ball and get in the spot. And someone that didn't do well to judge the flight of the ball was Dean Buzanis, and all of a sudden Caputo's there with just a completely empty goal in front of him. And nods at home. So that, you hear all the time, Caputo's had a barren run of scoring. Sometimes you need one just to, go in off your bum or something. Sometimes you just need one to fall to your head without a defender with no goalkeeper in the net, right? And then you're off and then you're scoring again. So he did well, but this game was really dominated by three very controversial refereeing decisions, Jacob. I'm curious for your thoughts on these. So one is the foul on Nathaniel Atkinson that denied Andreas Kuhn for City's second. Seemed to be a pretty soft foul. And then there were two handball shouts for the Brisbane Roar as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that first one, the Atkinson incident. Definitely very soft. I
think it's a goal, straight up.
Yeah. I don't think that should be... Yeah, it's way too soft. Way too soft for sure. Should definitely be a goal. And you can obviously the partisanship of it all comes into it, and you can understand why both sides are looking at it in those completely opposite ways.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I do think from that kind of neutral, more objective standpoint, it definitely is very soft. Then the handballs. What can we even say about the handball rule anymore? To be honest, because it just feels like you can never quite know what is going to be given both on the field and then by VAR every given week. It's just something, there's something different. And,
I think they're living very dangerously,
They
both
are.
of them.
They are living incredibly dangerously, but again, it's one of those. It's that thing, like I just said, though. It's they're living dangerously, yes, but we've also seen just so many non-calls given, but also some that have been borderline not handball that have been given. It just you can't really blame them for not, if that makes sense, right? It's like
it's so close to the middle of everything, because I think there is a little bit of leaning. Like, it is not a completely natural position, but is it an unnatural position because they're actually trying to tuck their hands in and that's what makes it look unnatural? Or are they actually kind of, yes, tucking
doing
their
a
hand in, but also leaning their shoulder? Yeah, we're kind of doing our best recreations on the video right now in case you're just listening to the podcast, doing all these little hip hop moves. Someone else was doing that the other night. I think it was like Vidicic or something, trying to like explain how Ferreira's arm was going. It was pretty funny, Vidic, maybe. But yeah, look, there was a little bit of leaning, a little bit of disco, 80s disco or something in there. So it's so hard to pick.
And that's the thing is with leaning as well, is you're then judging intent, and intent is impossible to judge. And it's why if you actually look at any laws of the game, you will not see intent written anywhere, because you can't judge what a player is trying to do. That's why it's things, with like serious foul play, it's looking at, where did the contact occur, how much force was in the contact. It's these things that you can measure objectively. It's not, did they mean to break that guy's ankle? Here, it's not, did they mean to, do that? There is, I think there is, there's the idea of deliberate handball, and that's kind of a lot more obvious when you see it, like a Luis Suarez at the 2010 World Cup.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Volleyball it off the line. There. But here is where it's in that kind of grey area, right? You said it's kind of right down the middle of a bunch of different things, and that's why it's not strictly written in, did they intend to do X or Y? It's this idea of a natural position. And I do agree there's a little bit of leaning, and they're kind of pushing the boundaries quite a bit. And, it just, it feels... It feels very iffy, I suppose, kind of either way. Like, I wouldn't hate seeing those given, and trying to kind of bring defenders back into, hey, hands behind the back. How long has that been a common thing for, right? Just if you're trying to block a shot or you're trying to block a cross or whatever, you're just getting your hands behind your back and completely bringing that out of the equation. But then when you're kind of, also sticking it out as well, it brings that other element in. We saw in the kind of unrelated, but kind of slightly related in the Adelaide game, with the handball given because he was holding his shirt. So it's like it was a natural position to be holding the player's shirt, but that's an illegal action, so it's still handball. So I don't know if maybe you could try and spin something here, but no, it's it was they're definitely pushing the line of the letter of the law. But when, like I said, it has been so inconsistent over the last year, over the last season, you can't really blame defenders for trying to gain every inch that they can, right? I mean, like, you got to use every tool that you've got available to you. And if that's kind of, the referees being stuck in a grey area, all power to you. Obviously it's not great for the game having that inconsistency, but you can't really blame players for trying to lean into it a little bit.
100%. And that is actually a really good segue to one of the points I want to bring up about the Macarthur-Auckland game on Monday night, is using the resources available to using your football IQ, and not necessarily the angles and your passing and but your cleverness and using the rules of the game to your advantage. Because the goal that Lachie Brook scores, he could have had a hat-trick in this game. He had two very good chances later on as well. But the one he does score, number one, I think it's ridiculously poor defending for what's been a very good Macarthur side in terms of managing those transitional moments. I think by the time Sakai gets the ball on the right wing, they're like 3-on-6, and they manages to play one ball in behind to Lachie Brook and he scores a goal. And that should never happen, especially the way they transition so far up the field. Like, it's a Louis Vestrada pass from the top of the box that goes to Sakai. But as Vestrada is playing that pass, Dean Bosniak is right on him, and he realizes he's not going to get a clean run at the ball, and so he does the hands up, kind of like skirt out the way to not make a foul. And one of the things that have been so good about, one thing we've commented about Brisbane Raw, Auckland are very good at it. They did it later in this game. Francis Thavri gave away a yellow card right on the edge of the box. Melbourne City do it extraordinarily well as well. They gave away the most fouls last year in their championship winning season in the entire league. doing those fouls at the right moments to destroy the promising attacks. Now, as I said, this was a 3-on-6. Maybe it's not one where you want to take a yellow card in this situation, but especially that deep, a lot of players are very good at just the accidental little nudge that doesn't look so deliberate, where the referee goes, oh, that's pretty far back. That's not even a yellow. If Dean Bosniak makes that foul and even takes a yellow card, but probably there's a scenario where he makes it look innocent enough to where he doesn't get a yellow card. That attack doesn't happen. Auckland don't score a goal. MacArthur, Tommy Uscox comes in later, scores a header, and they win 3 points, right? It's those little moments. I think there's an opportunity missed. We talk about physicality and breaking down the play a lot at the moment, but it's an advantage that players will use within the laws of the game and to fool the referee, not even fool the referee, but use the referee in certain moments to gain an advantage, and that wasn't taken here.
Yeah, it was the same way that, a winger might look for contact in and around the box to draw an easy foul, right? They'll leave a little foot out. And for a referee, you can't necessarily not give it unless you've got really, you're right on top of it, right? It just looks like, he's been tripped. It's, you give that call more times than not. And in the same vein, you've got these defenders or defensive players that can kind of make contact but make it look accidental or make it look like they didn't mean it, or that they just kind of stumbled and tripped and accidentally fell onto this player or that player, and just kind of playing around with the laws of the game a little bit. And I mean, that's part of the game. Gamesmanship is there to be used by attackers and by defenders, so it kind of evens itself out in that regard. But no, you're right, it did come down to just those little moments, I think, for MacArthur, which is why it's kind of a draw against Auckland for most teams would be great, but I think MacArthur would be a little bit annoyed with this one because it was, one moment in that game. They defended the transition poorly, and they have been pretty well set up defensively most of the season, MacArthur. Obviously, they had that game against the Jets, which was, we'll just write that down as weird and never going to happen again.
Box office Jets.
that was just a strange game, but for the most part, they've been, again, pretty defensively solid. It's kind of been a hallmark of their football over the years. So to have it slip up in transition like that, like you said, in a kind of player situation, 3v6, you should not be losing that as easily as they did. It just, that's going to sting for them. I mean, Lachie Brooks on the score sheet again. He's having a great season, and Auckland will be loving that he's signed with them. But from a MacArthur perspective, those are the things that you can't afford, and especially with them, such a tough fixture list, congested at times because of their Asian commitments and things like that. It's dropping those chances to take all 3 points that is going to really hurt them in the long run. I mean, the good news is, right, that it's still very tight, and they're still right in and around that mid pack, and they can more than easily. I mean, I think they're actually just ahead of them, aren't they? I think they're sitting on 19 points or something in third place. So they've still got a little bit of a buffer, but it's you can't let those kind of mistakes happen too often, because MacArthur, as defensively solid as they've been this season, haven't been the team that's going to go out there and put 3 or 4 past you and win the game like that. So it is relying on their defense to be, extremely well disciplined and not to make those mistakes. And so when they do, it kind of, it's a disappointing result for them. They've just got to do better in that moment, I suppose. And it is what it is. Bosniak, if he gets that foul off. I mean, there is a world where he gets the foul off. Sakai still manages to get the pass off, and they score anyway.
Sure,
If the ref plays advantage or whatnot, but it's so tight, and those are the things that change a football game completely. You've got to give credit as well to Sakai, I suppose, in being able to get the ball out and just kind of. Good pass, good ball in behind to Lachie Brook, but to know that Bosniak's there and to be like, right, if he fouls me here, the chance of a counter is probably off the books completely.
I've got to get
I've got to get on the strike. Sorry, got to get the ball out immediately and job done. So defenders this week trying to push the letter of the law with their handballs and with their fouls, more successful in one game than they were in the other.
They were indeed. Sorry, my laugh before was the line that you said that the Bulls aren't one to score 3, pass you and win the game. but they are one to score 4 and lose the game.
Lose the game, yeah.
One time they actually score
the
a lot
one
of
game
goals.
where they're scoring freely and they're having a good time in the final third, and they're just capitulating at the back.
Still a ridiculous game. That was. I want to give a shout out as well. Callum Talbot, I think his performance at right back for the Bulls was the best I've seen, especially like his delivery into the box. I saw one particular Melbourne City fan on Twitter going, "Where the hell was that when you played for us?" He got the assist for Uzcock. He had a ball into Harry Sawyer as well that Sawyer would have been very disappointed with not to get on target as well. So fine moments. As I said, Brooke had a couple other chances. It's not just down to that Bojnak moment, but that's the one. That's the goal that went in. On A-League notes as well, Jacob, before we move on to some under-23 Asian Cup stuff, Warren Moon has been permanently appointed as the head coach of the Central Coast Mariners. Feels like good reward. He came in right on the end of the season. Obviously, they're sitting towards the bottom of the table. He hasn't had a deep squad to work with. Reinforcements are coming. The ownership, to our understanding, is yet to be approved as well. So when you're halfway through a season, I feel like it makes sense to give him the rest of the season, see what happens, and then new owners, new decision makers can take it from.
Yeah, exactly. He seemed quite chipper after their win over Adelaide United. Obviously, beating Adelaide United 4-0 away, you're going to be quite happy after that, but maybe he kind of knew as well that something might be coming his way in terms of some job security. And like he said, there is that promise of investment into the squad for the Mariners, which, that's going to be well received for them, because it's not been a fantastic season, but I don't think it's been as bad as a lot of people, myself included, thought it was going to be for that club. So, they've done a decent job to kind of, be above the Wanderers, I suppose, right? Not full to that level. And, you're looking at them 11 points. They're not massively far off. They're 6 points off the 6, which is, that's a fair chunk. But with the January transfer window in, some good signings, anything can happen and it can change your fortunes. You've got a coach now who knows he's in this position, at least for the foreseeable future. It's the sort of thing that could turn the season around, and it was a fantastic win against Adelaide. So, if they can play that kind of football consistently, and I don't think there's any reason why they can't, then all of a sudden now, having gotten some results early on in the season, setting you up nicely if you can just make a run into the back end. But I don't want to get too over the top, because I feel like we've said this about teams in the past. Perth Glory a couple of seasons ago is the one that still haunts me of, they're gonna make the 6. They're gonna have this crazy run at the end of the season and do it, and then I think they lost like their last 4 games or something, and it was awful. So I don't want to jinx the Mariners. For the Mariners fans listening, I don't want to jinx you guys, but it's good news for that club, and like you said, Lachie, new owners coming in as well, hopefully. So that's when all those big decisions are going to be made. That's when any big changes to this club might be made as well. But for Warren Moon, I think, firmly deserves the appointment. He's been, pretty solid, all things considered, the situation he's found himself in, and kind of having to deal with at the Mariners. And he's done admirably well, and, comes across like a really nice guy as well. So, it's great to have those kind of figures in the league. Knows his football incredibly well. So, good on him.
Great stuff. All right, Jacob, you are a very good football mind, but as brilliant as you are, no one can compare to the niche levels of AFC knowledge as Matt Olsen. So I'm going to leave you here, and we're going to bring in Matt for some chat on the AFC Under-23 Asian Cup with the young Socceroos kicking off on Thursday evening. All right, Matt, welcome in. The Under-23 Asian Cup has begun by the time we're having this conversation on the podcast, but Australia's first game is coming up very shortly. First of all, before we get into the tournament itself, where do you stand on A-League clubs releasing or not releasing players? We talked about this issue last week. Obviously, there's a very patriotic element to Australian football, which I think a lot of people can appreciate. You want to allow players to represent their national team and experience that. But one argument that I posited on probably the devil's advocate side is that the under-23 maybe isn't as precious of an age group as some of the other younger categories. And, a lot of these players are very crucial to what their A-League clubs are doing at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think one thing that's actually pretty obvious about what this setup is here to do is that I think it's just all about trying to grow a collective of Asian countries together to give the players a platform that wouldn't otherwise exist. When you look at every single team in this tournament, and I'll tell you this right now, Lachie, Australia is the only country with multiple foreign players and has easily the most amount of foreign-based players in the competition. What we're looking at is essentially a tournament of B teams, and I think when we look at why an under-23 tournament might be happening outside an Olympic window, I think from a continental perspective, most of it is about essentially blooding in B teams for the national teams, solely with like an international focus. Whereas I think where countries like, two of our opponents in China and Thailand may very well be ruled that way in terms of what they do, Australia it's just not how we operate, right? So with that in mind, I think the selection of the players, honestly, and I'm saying this as someone who obviously follows the Glory quite convincingly, what we've done in obviously letting someone like the situation with sort of Bosnowski that played out, I think that's someone right there who's not going to be getting his minutes. So go and give him his minutes against the Chinese B team, the Thai B team. It's the right thing to do. Whereas some players that are more valuable, and the names aren't coming to me off the top of my head because it's not what I researched for the segment, but yeah, there's obviously been a few who have been told no because you're more valuable to the A-League course. So it's all relative, right? It really is a player-by-player basis.
Yeah, someone like a Max Caputo who, as we're sitting here, a bare hours ago scored the winner for Melbourne City against Brisbane Roar. So you understand the optimism. If I'm understanding you correctly, and just to simplify this for everyone listening as well, so majority of the teams in this tournament will be playing close to a B team for the under-23 age category. So there's a number of players in this age category that are not coming to the competition.
No, sorry. When I say B team, I mean, let's imagine that this is the AFC Second 11 Asian Cup.
Sure. Okay, so B team to the national team.
Yes. Which is where the fact that it's an age category, and I think the approach that teams are taking with it is a bit of a non sequitur.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. What do you make of Australia's chances then?
Well, again, just really looking at the fact that I did just allude to it there, I think we've obviously are bringing the most foreign experience. So the question essentially of the tournament becomes when you look at, Lewis Agosti, for example, bowling it in the Serie C. Now the pronunciation. He's someone that will just like duck to water, right? If he's good enough to perform at that level, he should be good enough to go up against these players from the Thai League and CSL. That I imagine, because one side of the argument is right. These are players that are coming from these big clubs. Are they the depth of those big clubs, or are these guys that we've just seen Melbourne City face in the Champions League, for example? And when we look at our three group opponents, Iraq, most of their players are from Al Zarawa and Al Shorta. And that to me just says, well, these guys would have been playing in the ACL2 and ACL Elite, surely. Because how the hell do those two clubs have so many players missing? And so that's a big question, right? This entire CSL team out of China, there's a lot of intent in that. I think it's a very personal thing for a country like China, who have just been struggling with all they've put on the table in the sport. They've just not been able to get it right. So I think a tournament.
They're okay now because they got the Aussies in charge.
Well, that's a funny little thing you should mention. But for me, it's like China, this is a tournament where like it's made for them. Do you know what I mean? Like it's made for them to continue to test their depth, and that is a really big question. Looking around at some of the other groups, I mean, you've got the likes of. Group A has Saudi, Jordan and Vietnam, three countries that all take this level really seriously. You should see the street parades when a country like Vietnam does well in a tournament like this. They once famously made the semi-finals of the U23s and came back to literal like riots and the whole shebang. It's what it's all about in a country like that. Group B is Japan, Qatar, Syria, the UAE. There is so much fight packed in a country like Syria. Again, because this is essentially the second 11 going to play. A team like Syria could be a massive opponent to face. So, I guess the thing is, it's actually just a very, very even tournament on its merit. And again, the question becomes more about how they deal with the depth. A good way for the leagues to compare. How does the A League compare with the CSL on its current quality? How does the A League compare, with these big Iraqi teams out of the Champions League? That's the question we're essentially asking here. So. I'm thinking, definitely shoe in for quarterfinals. Where you go beyond that, because another thing you have to really understand with the way these tournaments are shaped, right, is take literally any other age group tournament, right, making the quarterfinal, that's usually the game to qualify for the World Cup. When it's just the quarterfinal, the meaning is different. And how the FA as a body kind of approach that? Do we want to go and grab another piece of Asian silverware? Wouldn't that be massive? It's a big question, but it's certainly, if they have the ambition and the want for it, I think with the squad that's been put out, they can achieve that. Yeah.
Interesting. So is there World Cup qualification for this tournament, or is it that
there's no such thing as the U23 World Cup?
Oh, of course. Okay.
This would usually be the Olympic qualification, right? So this is something I wanted to sort of mention at the start. So you know how AFCON have just had this big controversy where it's going from being held every 2 years to now being held every 4 years. I think something that I think personally, and no disrespect to anyone in the audience who really does have my insight on the game, but I think a lot of people in the audience here with RBA, you are really applying a lot of the European mindset where it's all about, a lot of what goes on in the international scene really doesn't matter. And I think from an Asian perspective, from an African perspective, from our lesser nations across CONCACAF, just that line of thinking, it's just totally different, right? So why you would play the U23s outside of the Olympic window, it's more to do with what the Asian Football Confederation, and if you think as the countries and the national bodies as like stakeholders of this whole body, I think the AFC have come together and said, do you want these national teams competing at U23 level more permanently? And they've all collectively come together and said yes. And so again, I think it's just one of those things where each continent has its own preferences, and there's a lot there that you really have to take into consideration with why a tournament like this is even happening in the first place.
Interesting. Okay. And on the competition, you brought up the idea of like, what does the A-League depth do? This is another theme that's come, like we saw the under-20s when they won their Asian Cup last year. The idea that maybe an Australian curriculum that was brought in 15 years ago, maybe the fact that a lot of younger players are getting more minutes in the A-League really benefited that age group. And you made the comparison with Iraq and the players who maybe even playing continental football. Do you expect that advantage that we saw with the 20s to follow through to this age group? Because we haven't really seen the results from the under-23 age category in recent times.
So, look, obviously it was with another network. It was with FPF, but I very, very religiously followed and went into camp with the U23 team prior to Paris for the simple fact that was a team that was unstoppable under Tony Vidmar initially, and then they got to the tournament. They played that curriculum style, very safe, very defensive style of play. They lost to Indonesia. They drew with Jordan very embarrassingly, and a team that literally looked like one of the best under-23 programs on earth ended up getting grouped at the Asian Cup, right? So that's something that I think is really, it either has to be addressed directly on here at the tournament, like we have to see the Trevor Morgan style as opposed to the Tony Vidmar style. The issue is Vidmar's still the coach. So when we really talk about it being solely like an on-pitch affair, I think that this is really where it's going to come to a head, right? Because again, where Morgan basically had a look at the failures of the U23s, tore up the script and went and won us an Asian Cup, that is the ambition we need to see. If they've kept Tony in charge, and by the way, someone that I've personally spoken to and interviewed before, someone that I do have a lot of respect for what he's achieved in his career, but it's just very obvious that with regards to the Paris campaign, it was a very embarrassing failure. That's just the fact. So I would like and I would hope that there has been a very important internal conversation about we actually want to see more of that style that Trevor brought in, and if it can be implemented, and let's not forget, it's Stephen Hall who saved the winning penalty, Lewis Agosti, who I mentioned earlier, another one of the players in the squad that was there for the 20s as well. Those guys can't then go into a program where the national team is playing differently. Well, what does that achieve? Like, it's not we're not caring about the results from an Olympics perspective. So let's go out and play more freely. And that again, probably one of the bigger questions of the tournament is we're bringing more foreign talent than any other team. Let's try and extrapolate on that. We're bringing this refreshed style that was brought into the 20s. We should go and extrapolate on it. But again, with the old regime in charge, it's hard to really say, and that ultimately is the big question here.
Tell you what, one of those foreign-based players I'm really looking forward to seeing is James Overy, the Manchester United fullback. He obviously made a Socceroos camp and was tested out in training and hasn't made his debut yet for the senior team, of course, but he's definitely one earmarked for the future, which is very, very exciting.
Another Trevor Morgan player from that World Cup as well.
Exactly. Yeah, he's been a part of that under-20 success, and he'll hope to build on it in the 23s. Matt, one of my favorite things about doing these little segments with you is that you often have more answers than I have questions to ask you. So a bit more of a broad one. What else should we be paying attention? What are the other talking points heading into this tournament?
Again, it's probably just about the big question of why the tournament is there to be able to develop international football, right? So if we see it more as, it's development for the players and not that bigger picture of what can the Socceroos learn from this, even if there's different personnel involved. What can we take from this tournament to make the next batch of 17s? Let's not forget the 17s are playing 5 World Cups in a row, yeah? So there's just a lot going on in that youth football space. Let's not take the opportunity and look at it as, that question of the players' development, because again, I think when we talk about under 23, I think it's a bit of an oxymoron, because someone who's 23 years old, they're not really a kid anymore. They're not developing. Like, they should already be in their prime. And so it's this B team approach. It's this overall approach of the international football program that the 15 other teams in this tournament are going to be playing at. So really, when we're looking at it from which angle, that's where we've got to look at it. And the question then becomes, from an internal perspective within Football Australia, what question are they asking? How are they developing? And their verdict on this and how that comes out, and the playing style, and who those successful players are, what it does for them domestically, that's ultimately gonna be our outlook on where we think the curriculum is growing and where we think Australian football is going, right? Let's not forget, though, I think, again, I've already kind of raised it as a point and a big question to ask, but just the actual look of these are players that are appearing continentally in the Asian Champions League. We know how they stack up against, these tired and overworked A-League teams on shoestring budgets in a Champions League context. How do they just stack up when it's straight up the national team? Do you know what I mean? And that's a question where bringing in the Overys, the Agostis, the Stephen Halls, who are in England and Italy, right? That for me becomes so valuable, because it's okay. Well, what we've done is we've kind of cheated, right? It's not an A-League 11. It's not really the B team either. But no one can say that, right? But what it is we've essentially taken that look of what a more continental AFC competitive team, that we're facing, and we're kind of pairing it against, that bit of flair we get from players with invaluable experience playing in the Premier League too, and things like that. So I think it's just a look of, if you can look at the individual battles, and if you can look at the stats line, just in terms of, were we on the front foot in this game? Were we dominant in this game? Did we just go and, really put the foot down against some of Al Zawra and Al Shorter's best talents, and guys that are, going to be, well, obviously they don't play directly against Melbourne City because of the conference system, but you know what I mean, right? It's actually a really good comparison to make. How do these Champions League teams compare against, some of these future Socceroos in the future? So even if you look at it from more of a Champions League kind of lens, that's really valuable as well.
It's interesting. I don't really, I mentioned off the top, right, the under 23 category, it isn't much of a youth group anymore. And you made the exact same point. And I think what has clicked with me hearing you speak about it, and I think a lot of the listeners will relate to this. We've talked a lot about Melbourne City and their academy and how they play a certain way, they train their players in a certain way, so that when they step up into the first team, that transition is seamless. And I think a lot of the conflict that is potentially going to come, as you say, if the Tony Popovich way of playing the Socceroos, or even just the Australian way, whatever the Australian way is, right, if that is so different to what Tony Vidmar is doing at the 23s, this is the group of players that is supposedly next on the list to be called up by Tony Popovich, the next batch of stars to be coming through. Obviously, you're not playing your top stars. Like Aaron Quinter isn't being selected, Jakarta isn't being selected, right? So there's decisions to be made there as well. But the balance between those two different styles is fascinating, and it's going to have longer term implications. It's
actually such a really good way of looking at the players individually while still taking the bigger picture into effect, right? When you look at let's take, someone who's 17 years old and they've just signed with Melbourne City, and they go through, and their education literally is all about that City platform, and this is how we play at CFG, and they're taught that. And then they go into the national team, and the national team does a similar thing. Here's our curriculum, and this is the style we play. But if they're contrasting, what individually happens in that player's career and in their mind? Do they learn to play a different way? Do they thrive in a way that they didn't think they could with a different style? And that's sort of the beauty of it as well, right? That's the beauty of international football. And whereas you can get all the best teams, and I'm pointing out Iraq so much because they're our direct opponent, right? And they're probably, arguably, could shape up as the better team in Group D, depending how things go. If we look at Iraq and you take all the best players together in Iraq, notice how homogenous that all is. It's all just, this is the Iraqi national team, this is the curriculum, these are how our better teams are playing in the league. And so by being a rare force of being the only team in the tournament that is able to take all of those contrasting styles, put them together, and then have a figurehead in Tony Vidmar who can work with that and weave in the Australian style to the strengths of the players. Such an interesting contrast. So that's where I'm contradicting myself, but I hope I'm still kind of making the point that's, relevant here, is that there is the team side of it, the curriculum side of it, and the administrative side of it. What happens with the individuals, though, is an interesting question. It can't be the only question, because this is not a development tournament. It's a youth tournament, but it's really not. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Care about the players, but don't make it about the players and the players only.
Okay, so the group stage opponents, Thailand, China, and Iraq on the 8th, 11th, and 14th of January. All those games are played at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Australian time. I'm sure it's broadcast on Paramount or something like that. One of the usual Australian football platforms. It's a 16-team tournament. You play your single round robin, and then the top two from each group go into the quarterfinals. Matt, can they win the darn thing?
Yes. Look, can they win it? I think it's really going to depend on being able to view the other teams more than us. Because I would say right now, yes, we probably are one of the best teams at the tournament, but I'm going off more of the reputation when I talk about Syria being a surprise packet. When I talk about, you've got the Saudi Pro League on our doorstep right here in this tournament. They're obviously going to be good. They've got an Italian coach that they've come in to recruit for the program as well. Like, obviously these teams will be good, but we need to see them on the pitch. Otherwise, yes, we can win it, but it's really going to matter about the here and now when a ball is being kicked. Also, one other thing that I just want to quickly shout out before we finish here, there is an Australian contracted player at another team at this tournament. And I do apologise, because I'm pretty certain a lot of Oz Championship heads and the NPL Victoria fraternity is going to know who this guy is, and I sincerely apologise that I don't. But South Melbourne's Kadir Kador.
Yes.
Yep.
So okay, he was one of the Western players that went to South for the championship.
Okay, yep. Right. Really embarrassing that I don't know that. He is in Lebanon's team for the tournament. So Lebanon, maybe an Aussie angle to take there as well. Lebanon will be in the group with South Korea and the very deadly Central Asian duo of Iran and Uzbekistan. So really, that's the group of death. You don't really give Lebanon much of a chance, but there is the Aussie angle there to take. And again, just in terms of that verdict, let's just wait and see how the whole thing goes, and then we can have the conversation about where is Australian football heading, where's the intent, and is there a point? Even if we come back as U23 champions of Asia, is that something that we can be proud of, like we were with the 20s?
Fascinating. All right, always good chatting to you, Matt, about AFC football. Appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again during the tournament.
No worries.
That'll do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you all very much for listening into this one. Football is finally back to its kind of wiggly schedule in the A-League, which I'm very much looking forward to. It makes it a little bit easier to track, as much as I love having football on every night, but it means we're getting close to some more AFC competitions, with the AFC Champions League 2 and Elite returning in early February. Thanks for listening again. We'll see you next time